In today's show, we're talking about practice. Practice, man. Practice. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard, Trailblazers reporter Mike Richman. You're listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen, coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make this part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, we're talking about practice. Practice, man, practice. In honor of Allen Iverson, but not really. This is going to be a little bit different show than we typically do here, getting back to my journalistic roots. Over the course of the last 10 days, the sort of final couple weeks or final 10 days-ish of preseason, I did some interviews regarding practice time in the league. So what I want to share with you today's program is how practice time has changed, sort of the death of NBA practices in general, and what is seen as sort of the impact of a league that is finding less time to practice for a variety of reasons. I interviewed several different characters that I'll introduce you to. This is sort of through a Blazers lens, but I think broadly it applies to most every NBA team. I think you're going to like it, and we will do more deep dives like this throughout the year, time permitting. You can take the man away from the newspaper, but he's still a newspaper boy at heart. So let's start it like this. The Blazers came back from preseason, had a community service day on Saturday and a full off day on Sunday after from all accounts, a pretty intense training camp session. They needed a real day off to kind of rest their bodies and their minds. They were back on the practice court Monday, and then on Tuesday, you're listening to Tuesday, October 21st program, and on Tuesday, probably after you listen to this, the Blazers will hold their final practice of the preseason because the regular season starts on Wednesday. Training camp did not have 2 days this year. In the past, Chauncey Billups has held 2 days for these things, where you come in the morning, work out, come back at night, and get another practice in. But this year he decided not to do that. But asking arounds, including Jeremy Grant, who told me that this year was probably even more intense than years in the past, even with sort of less practice time baked in, the Blazers really got after it. He joked with, when I was talking to Javonte Cook, that Javonte doesn't know what an NBA practice is like because he's only experienced training camp so far, and it won't be like that. Training camp is 3 weeks long. The Blazers also have unofficial practices where everybody's basically in the gym for 3 weeks prior to media day in September. That's 6 weeks of lead up to the NBA season. The Blazers practice more in the last 6 weeks than they likely will over the next 6 months. I asked Chauncey Billups about sort of the changing nature of practice for his team in the league since he's been in it. And Billups, mind you, is shy of 50 years old, but he's been a player, a broadcaster, and now coach directly involved in the NBA since 1997. Like, he has been in the league for closing in on 30 consecutive seasons. And Billups said that last year, talking about sort of the changing nature of practice in the league and for his franchise, that he counted during an 82-game season, they had 22 total practice days. And he estimated that about half of that, 10 or 11, were like full contact scrimmage days. Steve Kerr, the Warriors head coach, who's 10 years older than Billups and has been a player, broadcaster, and coach in the NBA since 1988, closing in on 40 years of NBA experience. Kerr estimated that his team had 10 full contact practice days, saying that they really just don't anymore. You have to find time to do it in the modern NBA. The Blazers aren't going to have 2 days off in a row and through the first 10 days of the NBA season. They'll go a full week without having a natural space that isn't a travel day or a rest day in between home games. So to find space to practice is already a challenge. It's not unique to the Blazers. Every team is operating on a similar schedule. And by my count, just looking at November, the calendar for the way the Blazers are going to play games offers 3 such stretches during the first 5 weeks of the season that would give the Blazers like a true practice day that would allow them to scrimmage, or at least have a scrimmage heavier practice. That means that the Blazers probably, if they push it, can find 3 days to practice between now and December 1st. Tuesday is the last one of these things for a while. When I asked Kerr kind of what's changed, right? He's been in the league a long time. He's coached the Warriors for a long time. He's got an older team, but they tried at one point to sort of thread the needle between having a young team that they were going to develop alongside their stars. But Kerr has seen a lot in his time from the 88 draft until coaching the Warriors and heading into the 25-26 season. And I asked Kerr, and he said the following: what's changed is everyone has a performance team. We have much more information, better knowledge, and we rely on those performance teams to help prepare guys, condition them. It used to be the coach's job to just kind of figure that out. I think the schedule, the way it maps out, is much different now. It feels like we have a game every other day all season. It's so rare when you even have 2 days off. It used to be that we'd have 4 games in 5 nights, and then we'd have a 4-day break, and I think that allowed for more practice time, whereas now it just feels like the guys who play 30 minutes, it's a day between games, and they're going to be on the training table preparing for the next game. So it's very, very different. What Kerr hits on there is the several specific factors at play that have kind of made practice in the NBA, made practice time in the NBA kind of slowly become extinct, slowly become a rarity. Coaches have had to go away from it as a sort of a necessity of modern basketball. One is sports science, right? It's the way teams play is different now. Kerr mentioned that when he was in the NBA, you guarded a very small circle just outside the paint, and that was as much as you really truly needed to defend. But now, with the way teams stretch the court and the way teams push and hunt threes in transition, that just like the amount of distance demanded that you cover both offensively and particularly on defense has changed. And like if you just look at total miles traveled, guys are really moving in the modern league. We know that it is more taxing style of play, but we also have a better understanding of like what bodies need. Like this is the sort of the teams have performance staffs now. They test your baseline flexibility and all these things, and so they know where you are and they can monitor your bodies better in a certain way. And I think there is an old head resistance to this that says like, oh, load management didn't exist and look at all these things. But I would offer you this, an analogy I heard recently is that we learned a lot more about the stars once we invented the telescope. Sometimes just being able to see it allows for the existence of things that we didn't know, right? We just have a better sense of what keeps guys healthy and what keeps guys fresh. So when veteran players do play one night, they play on a Tuesday and again on a Thursday, Wednesday's going to be a rest and recovery day. It is necessary by the way just sort of modern sports science works. We understand getting off your feet entirely is incredibly important. And then Kerr touched on the other thing is that the schedule has changed. The NBA over the last decade has worked hard to reduce back-to-backs. It's been sort of in the general interest of the league. They've had a couple years where they flopped the other way and like, whoops, we've had to go back to, more condensed schedules. They obviously had the season following the COVID year, the bubble year, when we were still, there was a shortened season, 72 games. It started in December and that really compacted things. So it isn't like a perfectly straight graph. But in general, we've seen a strong reduction in the number of back-to-backs. For instance, in the 2014-15 season, the average number of back-to-backs played by an NBA team was 19.3. Most teams played about 19 back-to-backs during their 82-game season. This year, the average is 14.4, and no team in the league plays more than 16. Plus, the NBA has prioritized these double set back-to-backs where you play the same team twice in the same building to reduce the overall amount of travel. Well, the emphasis on reducing travel and the emphasis on reducing the number of back-to-backs has spread out the season such that there are just fewer times when there are consecutive days off where coaches feel comfortable putting their players out to truly practice and get after it, to truly play. But it wasn't always like this. This is a relatively modern phenomenon. I've spent a decade or more around the league with some regularity, and I don't think it was I don't think teams practice zero when I first got into the league, but it was already trending in this direction. And now I think over the last few years, the likelihood that a team has a regular practice even once a week is incredibly slim. And to talk to coaches, Chauncey Billups, Steve Kerr, and Doug Christie, they wish they had more practice time. And when I said it wasn't always like this, I also asked guys who'd been in the league a while what it used to be like. Billups, who again was drafted in 1999 and spent, the first half of this century playing in the, I guess to date, playing in the NBA, right? Spent 15 years playing in the league in the early, starting in the early 2000s. Or I guess the turn of the century, and he recalls during his playing days, hard practices into March. It was just a different thing. Doug Christie, who came to the league in 1993 and is coaching the Kings now, but has been around the NBA since on and off since then. He took a little break away, but has been back with the Kings for the last 4 years and is now their head coach. He remembers as a player in the 90s, shoot-arounds were taped. That means you went and got your ankles taped up because you were going to run around and get after it. That is basically unheard of now in the modern NBA. A shoot-around is a walkthrough. It's shooting practice. You're literally walking through stuff, but you're not going to play because you got to rest your body. There is an emphasis on that. Drew Holiday, Blazers point guard, drafted in 2009. Remembers his early days in the league. His first coach in the league was Eddie Jordan in Philadelphia, who was an old school college coach and ran a Princeton offense, and they practiced. And then it was Doug Collins, who was an old school coach, and they practiced hard. Alvin Gentry in New Orleans. Drew Holiday remembers that it was so demanding of a practice that if you were on the coaching staff, if you were in the building, you were likely out on the floor practicing because Alvin Gentry wanted to go all out. What Holiday says of his early days in the league is the following. We essentially played every day. There was some sort of contact or game competition played every practice. So you don't do that now. What do you do? How does it work? How are things different? In a league where you no longer practice with regularity, how do you teach these dang players? Let's talk about that in the second segment. Join me there. First, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by Built. Nobody likes paying rent, but if you must, you might as well get something for it, right? That's where Built comes in. Built is changing the game by turning your rent payment into real rewards that you can use. When you pay rent through Built, you earn flexible points that can be redeemed toward hundreds of hotels and airlines, a future rent payment, your next Lyft ride, and more. But Built isn't just about rent. It's about rewarding you around your entire neighborhood. So, Built does let your rent work for you. So you're earning points on every month on something that you already have to pay. But you can also earn Built points grabbing food at your local restaurant, heading to the gym. It can make your everyday life more rewarding. From your neighborhood to your travel plans. Turn your rent into rewards and start earning points around your neighborhood by going to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNBA. That's joinbilt.com/LockedOnNBA. Make sure you use that link so they know we sent you. Today's show's also brought to you by the good folks over there at Skims. What they're doing is making extremely comfortable underwear. They've made underwear for maybe the more feminine cuts in their time, but now Skims making underwear for everybody, including a men's line. They're super comfy, super quality, and Skims was nice enough to send me over a couple pairs, and let me tell you, these are really comfortable underwear. Listen, this is the highest compliment I can pay to its undergarments. They're extremely comfortable when I put them on, and then I don't notice them, and I can go about my day. The worst thing that can happen to you when you're living your life is to have to give consideration to your undergarments while you're doing everyday things, but instead, you're just going to be wearing really comfy underwear. Find a cut and a style that is right for you, and then you can do whatever you want to. If you're just lounging, sure, but also you can get out and be active in underwear that's going to just let you live your life. And that's what you want. Comfortable underwear that lets you live your life. So shop Skims Men's at skims.com and let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select my show in the drop down menu that follows. All right. So NBA teams don't practice, right? They used to. Old school players remember hardcore practices. Drew Holiday does. He was drafted in 2009. That's not even that long ago. Sort of maybe in the grand scheme, it is fairly long, going into year 17 in the league. But so what do you do? Like, how do you if you can't really get out on the practice court and scrimmage and run through stuff at full speed and let guys bump and run and be physical, and play basketball at practice as you would in, say, like a basketball practice, what do you do? Steve Kerr really lamented this challenge. He said it is harder to teach young players, but what he has realized that he has to do, and particularly with an older team where it's just like, even the older players just aren't going to be able to practice because they have to prioritize their health, that he's leaning on his younger coaches, not his generation that was, a basketball player raised in the 90s and the 2000s in the NBA. But he's finding that challenge harder to teach, so he's leaning towards coaches that have an experience teaching a totally new generation. He says the following: it does make it harder to teach, especially our young players, since we don't practice as much. We've really had to figure out better ways to develop. Less scrimmage time means fewer decision-making opportunities for those young players and that sort of thing. So we've really leaned on our young coaches over the last 3 years because, they're the ones who are at Santa Cruz where they are practicing 4 days a week. As a quick aside, that is the Warriors G League program. Kerr continues, they have a group of young players, some of whom have not played much college ball at all, so they've had to figure this stuff out. So we're preparing for our next game. As we're preparing for our next game. So I've really leaned on those guys. And Kerr went on to mention all of those players by name, or those coaches by name, because that's the kind of person Steve Kerr is. Doug Christie mentioned, maybe even the Kings might practice more than some other teams, but still, you have to figure it out. He mentioned that you have to be more creative. And one of the ways that he said creativity has to factor in is because you can't go all out, or you can't go out with the whole roster, right? Like even if you can run a competitive practice and a physical practice, 4 guys are sitting and not playing, right? Like DeMar DeRozan and Domantas Sabonis are going to sit and watch. So if you do need to work on something, if you do see something specific that you need to work on, Doug Christie mentioned that you find some things that you need in small-sided drills to emphasize something. And by that he means so you're not running up and down the court, you're not going full speed, you're saying hey, we really want to talk about how we guard this pick and roll. Let's drill that, how we send a guy. We're going to call a weak. We're going to send a guy to his weak hand. We're going to send him left, and we're going to have and we're going to make sure that our defensive group is ready to send him left. But Christie also mentioned that this is the demand of modern coaching. It is not you don't get to be old school. And he said, even if I came up with some coaches who really love to coach and coach hard, and when he was a player, he mentioned that he loved to play. He loved when you got taped up for shoot around because that meant you were going to get after it. And he loved the long preseason and whatnot, with playing extra games and then playing into the spring. Christie was the type of player that really adored it, right? That was something that meant something to him. But that isn't how the league works, and it is demanding that you be more creative. And Drew Holiday added the following, and I think this is really telling. Drew said, I think the challenge is how do we teach players? And there are different ways to teach. Some people learn by going out and doing. Some can watch film and retain, but I'm not a coach, Drew said. I think the best part of coaching is figuring that out. So if I were coaching out a young team, it might be different than an old team, but also within every team, you could see how hard they're working and what they're doing on the court during games. And in practice, you can walk through things so you can show them something without beating them up, because you want to make sure that if teams are doing things the right way, that they're spending their energy beating up the other team and not each other in practice. And the reality that Drew touches on here, I think, is important. You coach teams differently. Young teams are going to get coached and should be coached differently than old teams, right? A team with championship aspirations might, by necessity, need recovery days, need to practice less, because they are going to try to sacrifice, off day teaching and learning and reps for their veterans in January, so they can be playing into May and potentially June, right? If they're going to go deep into the spring, you just might have to punt on practicing for older teams, right? How often are the Clippers their incredibly old squad going to practice this year, right? You just get away from it because it necessitates it. I think younger teams probably do need more on-court practice time, the Trailblazers being among those younger teams. So they need the reps. Practice might be more valuable for a younger group. So I asked Jeremy Grant about this, and he mentioned you kind of identify what specific things players need, that's the art of coaching. And then if you see them struggling with it, then you can drill on that. Then you can say, okay, this is a really big need. That's our priority. Let's get out there and do that at full speed to make sure that they're seeing these pick and roll reads at full speed. But he also mentioned that even if you are doing that with a smaller group of players or even like a couple guys that are really struggling, the key now is that players have to watch film. You have to watch film. And Drew mentioned it in the quote I read you earlier. It's like that guys can really learn by watching, and that is the demand of the NBA. Is you have to be able to watch it and learn. And so Drew, when I was talking to him, mentioned that he said, like, well, I retain things quickly, and I think sometimes coaches underestimate how quickly their players can pick stuff up, because I didn't need to be coached hard. I didn't always need a really lot of practice because I could pick up a concept quickly. And when I said, Drew, that's why you're in the NBA for 17 years and going to make the Hall of Fame, he kind of laughed and said, slow down on the Hall of Fame talk, but maybe you're right. Like, maybe that is why I've stuck around, is that ability to like learn in different ways. And I talked about this with Jeremy Grant a little bit, and I thought it was really fascinating. Sort of, some guys are just like not visual learners. They're not going to learn well from film. They need to learn by doing. And sort of, while that may have been an option at some point, even if a guy doesn't learn well on film, if the other 8 guys who are available are not going to practice that day, it doesn't matter if he needs extra practice time. Like there are some folks who are going to get left behind by the modern NBA's lack of emphasis on practice by necessity because of what we know about the schedule and what we know about bodies. That has changed. I want to ask this question to close the show. Is this worse? Here's a spoiler for the other side. Steve Kerr was blunt. He said, I hate that we don't practice. Let's talk about everybody else on the other side. Join me in that third segment to close the show. First, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by Mint Mobile. If you're still overpaying for wireless, it's time to say yes to saying no at Mint Mobile. Their favorite word is no. No contracts, no monthly bills, no overages, no hidden fees, no BS. Say yes to making the switch and getting premium wireless for just $15 a month. Mint Mobile is simple. All plans come with high-speed data, unlimited talk-to-text, delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can bring your own phone and keep your same number and contacts. So you're going to get the same quality service that you've had on your current phone, but at a fraction of the price. And the setup is super easy. You keep your number, and then you're up and running in a matter of minutes. Ready to say yes to saying no? Make the switch at mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. That's mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. Upfront payment required of $45, equivalent to $15 a month. Limited time new customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed may slow above 35 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. Today's show is also brought to you by the good folks over at DUER. They are making really stinking comfortable jeans. I'm rocking the relaxed taper in black, and I'm looking good because DUER jeans allow you to do whatever. So I can go to work and look presentable and well put together. I can go out to a nice dinner afterwards, but I can also run errands. I can go to the playground. I can just be chilling around my house, and I'll be comfy because DUER jeans have 5 times the stretch of traditional denim. Plus, they feel stretchy without looking stretchy because DUER combines the classic jeanswear style with the kind of comfort and performance you get from athletic wear. It's the best of both worlds. DUER are pioneers of blending technical innovation with everyday clothing. They invented the original performance denim. There's a reason why they call them the world's most comfortable pants. But don't take my word for it. Go grab yourself a pair. DUER just opened a store right here in Portland, so you can feel the difference firsthand. Go check them out, 820 Northwest 23rd Avenue. They've been open for like a week. Go there now, and when you're there, use my promo code LOCKEDONPortland in store to get 15% off your first order, or check them out online. Shop DUER.com/LockedOnPortland for 15% off. That's shop DUER.com/LockedOnPortland. Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond, and you are still listening to Locked On Blazers. We're still talking about practice, man. Practice. Steve Kerr was blunt. He said, I hate that we don't practice. He even said it in another question. I kind of asked him pregame about this in a sort of public setting, and then someone else asked him a follow-up about sort of an unrelated thing about coaching and getting the best out of his players. And he just said, I hate that we don't practice. So is this worse? Is this worse that the teams just straight up don't practice anymore? Well, take Jeremy Grant, for example. Jeremy Grant's first 2 seasons in the NBA were with the Process Sixers, 2014, 15, and then 15, 16. And he recalled to me the sort of infamous, I knew about these, but I asked Jeremy about it, infamous 6-hour training sessions with Brett Brown. 3.5 hours in the preseason in the morning. You come back at night, you do another 2.5 hours. Every day for 2 weeks. You get after it. Physical, running all of the time. But I asked Jeremy Grant if that was the thing that allowed him to go from a non-shooting second-round pick who has signed several large contracts and now was holding court with me in the Blazers locker room at his corner locker after a decade in the NBA, heading into year 11. Jeremy Grant hesitated a little bit. He did. The early grueling practices that defined his early career, he said they were valuable, and he said that he needed them. And at the time, he really wanted to be coached and wanted to learn because he was trying to find his place in the league on a team that wasn't any good, but there was opportunity for them, and he knew that. But were those practices and those early experiences the things that sort of defined Grant's growth into being an NBA player, from going from second-round pick to someone who's made hundreds of millions of dollars? Nah. To be honest, Jeremy Grant told me, I worked on my shot outside of practice, right? So I don't know, maybe if we didn't have the 3.5 hour practice, I would go, work on my shot right after, instead of going after a 2-hour practice instead. I don't know. I mean, I attribute a lot of my development to JT, John Townsend, who was the shooting coach that Jeremy Grant worked with and now works for the Trailblazers, JT. And then he said his shooting coach in Philly, who's now with us here. And then my traders back home. And Jeremy Grant name dropped his trainers. For Grant, the thing that allowed him to really be a high-level skill developer was a commitment to developing those skills, right? It wasn't the practice court. It was honing. It was understanding I am a good athlete. I am the right NBA size. I have a chance, but I'm just not good enough at this one thing. Quietly, Jeremy Grant is a pretty impressive developmental story. He really was someone who couldn't make a shot and now got paid because he taught himself to really make a shot. To hear Jeremy Grant tell it, it was that work, a commitment to skill work with his trainers outside of, shooting coach outside of practice that allowed him to get there. So maybe this isn't so bad. And so while I think, from my sort of broad perspective, I do think a lot of teams like the Trailblazers would indeed benefit from more practice time if it was baked into the NBA schedule. Doug Christie was quick to point out in his response that the extremely youthful champions, Oklahoma City, were very good in an era where they had a super young team and they dominated the regular season and won the title in an era where you don't really practice, despite being the second youngest team in the history of the sport. Shout out to the 77 Blazers to do so, to hoist the trophy. As Christie said, obviously you can do it. It can be done. Yeah, in general, I do think more live reps would lend itself to sharper execution, right? I think that's kind of how practice works. And, more live reps, sharper execution, you have a better understanding of concepts, and you have a better understanding of the sort of concepts that you're going to see on the court because you've got full speed contact and full contact drilling on those things. You've seen the way the reads are going to work on both sides of the ball at full speed. And so for a team like the Trailblazers, it seems like more practice would be better. So I asked the Blazers' two most veteran players, gentlemen who are going to play this year, not Damian Lillard, said, Drew Holiday, is there going to be a time this year that you're going to really want to practice? And I asked Jeremy Grant, is there going to be a time this year when you are itching to get out on the practice court? And Drew was honest immediately. Said, for me, probably not. No. Practice can be valuable, but nah. In fact, as you will recall, earlier in our conversation, Drew had told me, I learned watching film and I retain concepts quickly. I don't need all this practice time. It's what makes Drew special, He's very smart. Jeremy kind of hemmed and hawed a little bit, right? He didn't want to say that, no, I'm never going to want to practice. He was maybe a little bit nervous. Javonte Cook, two-way player for the Blazers, is sitting next to his locker and kind of listening to this conversation. Does he want to say practice is for the birds or practice is for guys like Javonte, not me? No, he doesn't want to say that. But finally, after kind of trying to politic a little bit, I said, sounds like you don't want to practice. And he smiled and said, of course not. And as I walked out of the locker room, someone who works for the Trailblazers who was overheard a portion or all of my conversation with Jeremy Grant, but a team staffer who's in there says, kind of hears us talk in practice and says, the truth is in the NBA, you have to get better in games. And Jeremy Grant nodded. He said, it really is the truth. When the games start, you got to get better. And so the quest to get better begins. The Blazers will end their real season of practice on Tuesday with their final tune-up before the regular season starts. That's the last practice of the preseason. And then begins in earnest the quest to get better with the first game Wednesday evening at the Moda Center against the Timberwolves. Because in the NBA, they don't practice anymore. It's time to get better in the games. That is going to do it for today's show. Come back for tomorrow's program. We will preview the Blazers' first game of the season. You are not going to want to miss it. They open up against the Minnesota Timberwolves, and I will be here chatting on this very show with your boy Ben Beacon from Locked on Wolves. He'll give us the sort of view from Minnesota. I'll give our view. I will stand in for our view from the beautiful Rose City here, and we will look ahead to the first game of the season. It's here. They're going to play basketball. I couldn't be more excited. Tell your friends about the program. Tell them that Mike did a whole reporting show on practice, and he's doing 4 other episodes a week because that's what he does, 5 days a week, wherever you got podcasts, also on YouTube. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.